It's funny how life sneaks up on you, how the routine becomes comfortable, almost like a favorite chair molded perfectly to your shape. That's how it was for me and Rachel. After 20-some years, we had this rhythm, a dance of shared routines and old jokes that only made sense to us. If you'd asked me a year ago, I'd have sworn on my life that we'd still be the same couple, together through thick and thin. But looking back, maybe I was ignoring some cracks in that solid foundation. Rachel had a best friend, Emily, someone who'd been in our lives almost as long as we'd been married. She was like family to us, an aunt to our kids, and a sister I never had. Emily's energy had always brought this warm, easy atmosphere to our gatherings. They shared a bond one admired, a closeness that felt both deep and effortless. And for most of our marriage, I've been glad for Rachel to have someone like that in her life. But lately things felt off. It started small, with little looks exchanged between them that didn't feel quite like the friendly ones I'd always noticed before. I'd glance up from my paper or the television and catch them huddled close, talking in whispers and breaking into laughter before looking away. Even then, I shrugged it off. After all, friends had their secrets, right? Rachel seemed a bit more guarded, though always distracted by her phone, sneaking glances at messages that would bring a smile to her face. I tried telling myself it was nothing. She and Emily were close, and if she wanted to share something, she would eventually. But one night, that all changed. I'd come down for a glass of water, thinking Rachel was asleep. As I walked down the hall, I heard her voice, soft and low, coming from the living room. She was whispering into her phone, her tone warm and almost vulnerable. My first thought was that she was talking to our daughter away at college, or maybe her sister, but the way she spoke felt more personal, more intimate. She kept saying things like, "I've missed you today," and "You know what you mean to me." Those weren't the kinds of things she'd say to anyone but someone she held close, or maybe closer than I wanted to imagine. When she saw me in the doorway, she jumped, fumbled to end the call, and stammered something about it being a late-night chat with Emily. I didn't push too hard, but my silence must have unsettled her because she quickly grew defensive, insisting it was nothing but a friendly conversation. Yet, as I stood there, looking at her in the dim light, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease creeping up my spine. It was like a shadow had been cast over everything I thought I knew about our life together. Morning routines are a comforting blur for me, a mix of coffee, newspaper, and familiar silence before the day fully kicks in. But that one morning, the silence was replaced by a soft, distant laugh from the other room. Rachel's laugh, warm and rich, floated down the hallway, followed by a tone I hadn't heard from her in years. It sounded soft, affectionate. I paused in the doorway, watching her as she sat on the edge of the couch, phone pressed close to her ear. I wasn't eavesdropping, not intentionally, but I caught bits and pieces of her conversation, and something about it made me stop in my tracks. Rachel was saying things like, "You know what you mean to me," and "You always know just what to say." A strange feeling twisted in my chest as I realized that the way she spoke in that moment was the way I used to speak to her back in the early days. She was so absorbed in her conversation that she didn't hear me shuffle closer, and when she finally noticed me, she jerked the phone from her ear like she'd been caught doing something wrong. Her face flushed, and she stammered, ending the call abruptly with a quick, "I'll call you later." "What was that about?" I asked, keeping my tone even though my heart hammered in my chest. Rachel's reaction was immediate. She went on the defensive, shrugging off my question with a dismissive wave. "Oh, it was just Emily. You know she's always there for me, Mark. We were just talking about life, work stuff, you know, the usual." She flashed a reassuring smile, but there was something off about it, like she was trying too hard to appear casual. But the look in her eyes, something between guilt and defiance, stayed with me long after she brushed off the conversation. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think it was just me being paranoid, imagining things that weren't there. After all, Emily had been like family to us for years. Why would I suspect anything more? Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I was missing, a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. As I watched her go about her morning, her eyes avoiding mine, I made a decision to keep a closer eye on things. Maybe it was just in my head, but there was only one way to know for sure. Rachel and I have always had a transparent approach to finances. Well, I thought we did. As my suspicions grew, I found myself drawn to those untouched areas of our life, the things I'd never had reason to scrutinize before. Her unusual conversations and the increasing number of evenings out with Emily were all nagging at me. So one evening, as Rachel was busy in the shower, I sat at the kitchen table and logged into our shared account. The statements loaded slowly, line by line, each charge telling its own story. I scanned them quickly at first, expecting the usual coffee shop stops and grocery runs, but then the details jumped out, unraveling themselves like a mystery I hadn't wanted to solve. There were charges for upscale restaurants we'd never dined at together, day spas I knew she hadn't visited with me, and reservations at a local boutique hotel in town. Each one made my heart sink a little lower. Then came the clincher: social media posts, casual as anything but somehow sinister in context. I found Rachel's photos tagged at these places, but there was no sign of me in any of them. Instead, it was always Rachel and Emily, laughing together, clinking glasses over a fancy dinner, lounging in luxurious robes at the spa, grinning side by side in dimly lit, cozy booths. I studied each picture, searching for signs I hadn't noticed before. The small touches, the way Rachel leaned toward Emily, her eyes gleaming in a way that I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. It was more than friendship. I knew it. When I tried to bring this up with friends, hoping to either be reassured or have my concerns validated, they dismissed it. "You're probably overthinking it, Mark," they'd say, or, "You know women and their best friends. They could be closer than we understand." But their words only made me feel more isolated. I couldn't shake the sense that there was something darker, a kind of intimacy Rachel shared with Emily that went beyond what I'd ever experienced with her. I needed to know for sure. So, the next time Rachel mentioned she had a night out with Emily, I kept my face neutral, nodding as if nothing was wrong. But once she left, I grabbed my coat, keys, and a determination that was half anger, half heartbreak. I was done with the wondering, the agonizing hints, and the constant doubt. As I followed her that night, my hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. That night, as I sat parked in the shadows across from the dimly lit cafe, my heart pounded with a mixture of dread and disbelief. I watched Rachel as she entered, her expression excited, maybe even a little nervous. I wanted to dismiss it as paranoia, as me jumping to conclusions. But then Emily arrived, walking straight toward Rachel with a smile that made my stomach twist. They slid into a booth by the window, leaning in close enough to almost touch. I could feel my pulse quicken as I watched their every move, hoping, praying that I was wrong about what this all meant. But as their conversation grew more animated, their hands began to reach across the table, fingers brushing, and Rachel's eyes sparkled in a way I hadn't seen in years. It was like seeing her with a new life breathed into her, but for all the wrong reasons. Then it happened. Emily's hand moved from the table to rest on Rachel's cheek, and Rachel's face softened, a tenderness in her gaze that was unmistakable. Rachel placed her hand over Emily's, holding it there as if she never wanted to let go. And as I sat there, barely breathing, Rachel leaned forward, and Emily met her halfway. I watched as they shared a kiss, intimate, unhurried, and layered with a depth I'd thought was reserved for us. The shock was physical, like a punch to the gut. I felt as if my entire world had been wrenched away from me. Not only was Rachel cheating, she was cheating with Emily, her best friend, someone I'd trusted implicitly. The betrayal was so deeply twisted that it felt surreal, like I was watching a stranger's life instead of my own. For years, I had been utterly blind to this side of my wife, never once imagining she'd be capable of such deceit, especially with someone she called her friend. Rachel rested her head on Emily's shoulder, a relaxed smile playing on her lips as she closed her eyes. They looked so comfortable, like two people who'd shared this secret for a long time, maybe even finding thrill in it. Every laugh, every whispered word, every gentle touch between them chipped away at me. In that moment, I felt like I didn't know Rachel at all. This side of her, the secretive, passionate woman who would betray everything we'd built, was a complete stranger to me. And Emily? She'd been like family. I couldn't reconcile the image of her as a trusted friend with what I was seeing now. The reality of Rachel's double life, hidden right under my nose, was a blow I couldn't prepare for. Eventually, I had to look away, feeling a numbness wash over me. It was almost worse that the betrayal came from Rachel's connection to another woman. Part of me felt confused, even angry. Had she ever truly loved me? Or had our whole life together been a cover for feelings she never shared with me? And why Emily? Of all people, why her? There was a kind of cruelty to it that left me reeling. As they stood to leave, their fingers entwined, I stayed hidden in the car, forcing myself to breathe through the anguish, trying to gather some sense of control. But I knew the truth now, and there was no turning back. Watching them drive off together, carefree and oblivious, I felt the weight of what they'd stolen from me settle deep in my bones. I drove home in silence, each mile bringing with it a storm of emotions: betrayal, disbelief, and the realization that the woman I thought I'd known for years had been living a life I couldn't comprehend. I didn't sleep that night. When Rachel came home the next morning, the sight of her, acting so nonchalant, as if nothing had happened, fueled my anger. I waited until she settled into the kitchen, putting on her act of casual routine, and then, without hesitation, I confronted her. "Were you with Emily last night?" My voice came out colder than I expected, loaded with everything I'd held back. Rachel froze, then looked up at me, feigning confusion. "What? What are you talking about?" "I followed you, Rachel. I saw you with her." I kept my gaze steady, waiting for her to stop pretending. A flicker of guilt crossed her face, but she quickly covered it, shaking her head. "Mark, you're misunderstanding. Emily and I were just catching up. She's been going through a rough time, and I've been there for her, that's all." I took a steadying breath, feeling frustration rise as she continued to brush off what I knew was a lie. "I saw you, Rachel. You were kissing her. You held her like—" I stopped, the words catching in my throat. "Like you've never held me." She looked away, and I could tell she was scrambling for an answer. "Look, it's not what you think," she said, trying to regain her composure. But she couldn't meet my eyes. "Then explain it to me," I demanded. "Explain why you're sneaking around with your best friend, lying to my face, pretending there's nothing wrong." Finally, Rachel sighed, the facade breaking. "Fine," she muttered, sitting down and folding her hands as if trying to steady herself. "You want the truth?" "More than anything," I replied, bracing myself. "I've always been drawn to women, even as a kid," she began, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know what to do with those feelings. I thought they were a phase, something I'd eventually outgrow. As she continued, her words were heavy, almost reluctant, but something shifted in her tone. "When we got married, I convinced myself that those feelings would disappear. I thought if I just tried hard enough, if I loved you enough, it would go away." She looked down, avoiding my gaze. "But it didn't. And then Emily, she was the one who showed interest first, and it was like I couldn't stop myself." I tried to wrap my head around what she was saying. "So you've been living this lie with me?" "Mark, it wasn't a lie," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I do love you." I thought I could move past these feelings, bury them, but then Emily started. She wanted more. She made me feel like it was okay to be myself, for once, even if it meant hiding it. Her words hit me hard. I struggled to find the right words, grappling with the enormity of what she was saying. "So this whole time, I've been someone you settled for? A placeholder?" "No, it wasn't like that." She seemed desperate to reassure me. I tried to make it work, but with Emily it's different. I feel something I can't feel anywhere else, and I needed that part of me to be seen. The revelation, the rawness in her voice, tore me apart. "So you needed her? To satisfy some part of you that you couldn't find in me?" She nodded slowly. "I didn't plan for any of this, but she understands me in ways I didn't know I needed." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Her lack of remorse, her calm admission, felt like she was ripping our marriage apart, piece by piece. "I don't even know who you are." I managed, my voice hoarse. "You say you tried to love me, but the minute it got hard, you ran to her." Rachel took a deep breath, her eyes filled with a strange mix of defiance and regret. I'm sorry if this hurts you, but it's the truth. I can't erase who I am. Unable to bear any more, I turned and left the room. For years, I'd seen Emily as her confidant, her support, and now I was realizing just how deep that connection ran. Far deeper than anything we'd shared in recent years. As I walked away, I knew one thing. I wouldn't let her justify this as a momentary lapse or an emotional need. This was betrayal, and I wouldn't let her diminish the pain of it. After our painful confrontation, something gnawed at me. The depth of Rachel's attachment to Emily went beyond a mere affair. It felt like there was a bigger piece of the puzzle I was missing. Determined to find the truth, I dove into her family history, digging through records, old letters, and any trace I could find that might explain what was going on. The first clues came from a dusty box of old documents Rachel kept in the attic. I'd seen it before, letters from her mother, some childhood keepsakes, things I'd never paid much attention to. But one envelope caught my eye, a letter marked with a date that didn't match the rest. It was from Rachel's mother to someone named Robert, dated back to the early 1980s. I carefully unfolded the letter, my heart pounding as I read it. The letter was written with a warmth and familiarity that didn't seem like it belonged to a casual acquaintance. Rachel's mother mentioned a promise to Robert about keeping the secret for the sake of the girl's happiness. The word girl stood out, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I put the letter aside, each clue adding to the sinking feeling in my gut. Pulling out my phone, I searched through old family records online, tracing the connection between Rachel's mother and this man, Robert. It didn't take long to uncover a birth record for Emily with Robert listed as her father. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. That night, I waited for Rachel to come home, a sense of betrayal building as I pieced together the implications. When she walked through the door, I confronted her without hesitation. "Rachel," I said, unable to mask the anger in my voice. "Why did you never tell me that Emily is your sister?" The color drained from her face, and for a moment, I thought she'd deny it. But instead, she just stood there, speechless, before finally nodding. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Emily is my half-sister. We share the same father." I felt a rush of emotions, anger, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal. "You've kept this a secret from me our entire marriage? You built a life with me, letting me believe she was just your friend." Rachel looked down, seemingly unable to meet my gaze. "I never wanted you to find out this way. It was complicated. My mother made me swear to keep it a secret, to protect both our families." "Protect us from what?" I demanded. "From knowing the truth? You've been lying to me for years." "It wasn't just to protect you, Mark," she said, her voice strained. "Emily and I grew up knowing about each other, but we were told to act like we were just friends. It created a bond between us that no one else understood. She was always more than a friend to me, even before things got complicated." "So, this bond you're talking about," I interrupted, barely holding back my anger, "it's been more than just friendship and family. You're telling me that your connection was always something I couldn't be a part of." Rachel looked up, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "Yes." I couldn't just push her away. She was a part of me I couldn't ignore, a side of me I didn't think you'd understand. The full weight of the betrayal hit me then. Rachel's relationship with Emily had been shrouded in secrets and hidden motivations, a private world they'd built together. For years, I'd been the outsider, fooled into believing that I was part of something real, only to realize that I'd been shut out of a secret life Rachel and Emily had crafted behind closed doors. Feeling cornered, Rachel tried to soften the blow. "Mark, I kept it from you because I wanted to protect what we had. I never wanted you to feel like an outsider." But her words only deepened the wound. "Protect me?" I echoed, my voice shaking. "You didn't protect me, Rachel. You used me. You lied to me." She reached out, but I took a step back, feeling disgusted and betrayed. The person I thought I knew, the life I thought we shared, it all felt like a carefully woven web of lies. As I turned away, I realized that nothing she could say would make this right. The betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was a lifetime of secrets, lies, and manipulation. I walked out of the room, unable to bear the sight of her. knowing that the Rachel I'd loved no longer existed. The days following Rachel's confession were some of the longest and most painful of my life. I couldn't shake the thought that everything I'd built, the life I thought we'd shared, had been shattered by her deception. There was a weight on my chest, an ache that I carried with me from morning to night, and I knew it wouldn't go away until I confronted her once and for all. On the third day, I sat Rachel down in our living room, the place where we'd shared so many moments, good and bad, over the years. I could see that she knew what was coming. There was a nervousness in her eyes, a flash of guilt, but also something defiant, something I didn't recognize. It only fueled my resolve. "Rachel, I've been thinking about everything you told me, about you and Emily." I paused, gathering my words. "I need to know if you're willing to end things with her and focus on us, on fixing this marriage." She looked away, and for a long moment, the room fell into silence. Then she took a deep breath and looked back at me, her face etched with conflict. "Mark, I know I've hurt you, and I'm so sorry for that. But Emily, she's part of me in a way I can't ignore." Her voice softened. "Being with her, it makes me feel free, alive in a way I haven't felt in years. With her, I feel like myself." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't hesitating. She was choosing. I fought to keep my voice steady. "So, you're willing to throw away everything we have? All these years we've spent together?" "It's not that simple," she said, her eyes pleading with me to understand. "I want to be with you, Mark, I do. But I also need this connection with Emily. I thought maybe we could come to some sort of arrangement." She reached out, trying to hold my hand, but I pulled away. "An arrangement?" I asked, disbelief lacing my tone. "Yes," she continued, undeterred. "A modern arrangement. We could stay married, keep what we've built together, but I could still see Emily on the side. You wouldn't have to worry. It wouldn't change anything between us." The words were surreal, like I'd stumbled into someone else's life. I stared at her, speechless, as she laid out her proposal, as if a secret relationship that she'd hidden for months could somehow be normalized. "Do you really think I could ever agree to something like that?" I asked, my voice breaking. "After everything you've done, all the lies and the betrayal, you expect me to just look the other way?" Rachel looked down, her fingers twisting the fabric of her sweater. "I thought we could adapt. That maybe, for the sake of what we've shared, you'd understand." "Understand?" I couldn't help but laugh, a hollow sound echoing in the silence between us. "You don't want a marriage, Rachel. You want me to be your safety net while you live some fantasy life with Emily. I can't do that. I won't." For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, but it was fleeting, quickly replaced by something colder. "I thought you'd be more open-minded, Mark. We've both changed, grown. You have to admit, things haven't been perfect between us for a long time." "You're right," I replied, anger simmering just below the surface. "But I never betrayed you. I never tore our life apart for some fleeting fantasy." She flinched at that but didn't respond. And in that silence, I felt the last shred of hope slip away. Finally, I spoke, each word laced with a finality that even she couldn't deny. "I won't share you, Rachel. I won't pretend like any of this is okay. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. I want you to leave." She looked at me, truly shocked for the first time, but I held my ground. I wasn't about to let her continue tearing me apart, living two lives at my expense. "Fine," she whispered, her voice icy. "If that's what you want." She rose, her shoulders straight, her head high. There was no remorse in her gaze as she looked at me one last time. As she gathered her things and walked out the door, I watched the woman I'd loved, the woman I thought I knew, leave my life. But even as she walked away, I made a promise to myself. This wasn't over. Rachel and Emily would both understand the cost of betraying the trust I'd given so freely, the love I'd shared so openly. I was hurt, but I wasn't helpless, and I knew that, in time, they'd both regret the day they chose to throw away our life for their so-called freedom. As Rachel walked out that night, leaving me in the hollowed shell of our broken marriage, I was overwhelmed by a strange sense of calm. The betrayal had devastated me, yes, but that initial, raw wound was beginning to harden into something else. something determined, unyielding. Rachel had betrayed my trust, shattered my heart, and treated me as a mere fixture in her life, assuming that I would forever serve as her safety net. But I realized now that I wouldn't just stand by and let her get away with it. I couldn't let her actions pass without consequence. For the next few days, I channeled my pain and fury into a precise plan. Rachel had kept her affair and the shocking truth of her connection to Emily hidden from everyone, family, friends, even the people closest to us. But that was about to change. I would bring everything she'd buried into the light, exposing her deception for all to see. I started with Rachel's texts and emails. I had saved screenshots of the messages I'd seen, and while Rachel had tried to be careful, a quick search through her devices and our shared computer unearthed months of exchanges, hidden in private folders she likely thought I'd never find. She'd laid it all out in these messages. Their plans to meet in secret, her feelings for Emily, the deep intimacy they cultivated behind my back. The correspondence was rife with coded language and suggestive remarks, but it was clear enough for anyone with an ounce of perception to understand exactly what had happened. In addition, I went through old family records, birth certificates, and letters, piecing together their shared history. Emily and Rachel were indeed half-sisters, a shocking twist that was sure to horrify not only our friends, but also the few family members who had remained blissfully unaware. I kept copies of every piece of evidence in both digital and physical formats, ensuring that no matter what, I would be able to reveal the truth when the time came. After a week of relentless preparation, I arranged a reunion gathering, inviting close friends, family, and even mutual acquaintances who had always admired Rachel. The invitations came with a note about wanting to reconnect and share an important family announcement. In the days leading up to it, I knew Rachel would catch wind of my plans, but I played the part of the gracious ex, inviting her and Emily, as well as others, without giving any hint of the storm I was about to unleash. When the day arrived, I set everything up in our house, a place that had once been filled with love and warmth. Now, it would bear witness to the unraveling of Rachel's carefully crafted illusions. I had printed out the most damning evidence, from love letters to vacation plans they'd shared under the guise of friendship, and arranged everything to display for our audience. As guests arrived, I felt a mixture of nerves and vindication. There was small talk, laughter, and people shared fond memories, all unaware of what was about to hit them. Finally, Rachel and Emily walked in, both of them visibly uneasy, no doubt sensing that something was off. They exchanged glances and tried to act natural, but I could see their smiles falter as they noticed the documents and photos I had laid out across the dining room table. After a while, I cleared my throat, silencing the room. Everyone turned to face me, curiosity etched on their faces. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before I began. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I started, my voice calm yet resolute. This gathering is not just about reconnecting, but about bringing certain truths to light. For a while now, I've been dealing with something painful and deeply personal. And since it involves people who are very close to many of us here, I believe it's time everyone knew. Rachel's face turned pale, and Emily's eyes darted to the door, as if considering an escape. But it was too late. Rachel and Emily, I continued, have been involved in an affair for months. This goes beyond mere infidelity. Emily is not only Rachel's lover, but also, as some of you may not know, her half-sister. A stunned silence fell over the room. Eyes widened, hands went to mouths, and an audible gasp echoed as people began to process what I'd just revealed. Rachel and Emily both froze, caught in the blinding light of their secret being unveiled in such a brutal, public way. I pointed to the table where I had arranged the evidence, inviting anyone to see for themselves if they doubted my words. I watched as our friends and family moved forward, picking up the pieces of evidence and examining them in horrified silence. Rachel tried to speak, stammering, "It's not what it looks like. Mark is twisting everything." But her words were hollow. No one could overlook the detailed evidence laid before them. Her attempts at explanation fell flat, and Emily stood beside her, visibly shaken, unable to meet anyone's gaze. This was far more than either of them had anticipated, being exposed like this, laid bare before everyone who mattered to them. The weight of their actions finally seemed to settle on them, as they realized they were now pariahs in the very social circles they'd once found solace in. One by one, people began to leave, some expressing disappointment, others refusing to even look at them. Friends who had once admired Rachel turned their backs, and family members walked out without a word, their faces marked with disgust and betrayal. The sense of isolation that fell upon Rachel and Emily was palpable. They were truly alone now, left to face the consequences of their own decisions. In the days that followed, I filed for divorce, securing my assets and making sure Rachel would receive the bare minimum she was entitled to. My lawyer and I ensured that she couldn't lay claim to any of the financial security I had worked to build over the years. I was done allowing her to benefit from the life we'd built together, a life she'd so recklessly torn apart. I also made sure to sever ties with any mutual friends who chose to sympathize with her, choosing to surround myself with people who valued honesty and loyalty. It was liberating, in a sense, to reclaim my life, to free myself from the shadows of Rachel's deceit. For the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of peace. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it was now tempered by a feeling of closure, a realization that I had done everything within my power to protect my dignity and hold Rachel accountable for her actions. She and Emily would have to live with the fallout of their choices, facing the whispers, the judgment, and the inevitable solitude. In the end, I found strength in the journey, learning to value my worth and recognizing that no amount of love or loyalty could justify allowing someone to treat me as a backup plan. I was free now, unburdened by lies and ready to embrace a life filled with authenticity and respect. And as for Rachel and Emily, I had no doubt that the consequences of their actions would follow them, a lasting reminder of what happens when deception and betrayal go unchecked.